Good afternoon to everyone, listening. It's great to have you on this panel today. There's so much that we look forward to learning today. My name is Solomon Fowowe, and definitely I'm not Tonya Bakari, because Tonya Bakari was the one that was meant to handle this session, but unfortunately he couldn't make it here because he's a little under the weather. But I'm sure we're still going to have a really, really fantastic time, talking about things from digital publishing. Today we're going to be talking about meeting the demand for content creation and adopting new models of doing business in a post-COVID-19 Africa. Well, that's quite a lot, smashed together into one, just so that we can be able to have, a to digital publishing, especially in Africa, and looking at it from the point of view of everything that has happened lately with the coronavirus, the COVID-19, and the crisis itself. And we have two wonderful speakers to join us today on stage. One is already here, that's Bukola Akingbade. It's great to have you today. And Bukola is one person that I really know. A couple of days ago, we had a chat together on Instagram, and it was absolutely insightful. So I'm sure we're going to be having a really fun time. She is the CEO of Kucheza Gaming. And Kucheza Gaming is an African-focused esports company for 6 to 18-year-olds. Kucheza is creating Africa's largest community of young gamers through a fusion of gaming, education, and culture, delivered in a non-threatening and inclusive way. Bukola is also a founding partner of Nucleus, a digital-first solutionist company, and the Republican Group, combiners of Tech Plus, Africa's largest technology platform and advertising with Africa. That's quite a hefty, heavy resume, you would say. It's great to have you today, Bukola.
Thank you so much, Solomon.
Yeah, we still can get through to Sean. I don't know if Sean is already here, but he's the second person that we're going to be having on the panel today. His name is Sean Burrows, and he is an absolutely amazing guy, absolutely amazing. He is a proud graduate of HBCU, Jackson State University. He officially launched Burrows Enterprise as BE in 2014, and as a result of his passion to build a community around entrepreneurship and strategic partnerships, in 2017, Sean joined the ranks of those driving African tech ecosystem development as the COO of Ingressive LLC and as the co-founder of the Ingressive for Good, that's I4G NGO in 2020. Since joining the team, Ingressive has expanded from Nigeria into Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, and Rwanda. It's great to just see you join us. You came right when I was reading out all of the accomplishments and all of the things that you have done. It's great to have you join us, Sean.
Awesome, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I had to make an entry.
Yeah, you actually had to do that. So, to all our listeners out there, like I said, today we're going to be talking about digital publishing, meeting the demand for content creation and adopting new models of doing business in a post-COVID-19 Africa. And it brings me to my first question at this point. I think it's good we clarify certain issues, And my question goes to Bukola now. Would you say that this crisis has caused an increase in demand for content at this point?
Yeah, of course. I think that's one of the main things that we've seen a surge in is that because we're all, on lockdown, we're at home, we're uncertain. There's a lot of spike in kind of news data or news information required. So you've seen a spike in that. And it's weird because pre-COVID, we're talking about fake news and trying to solve that problem.
Yeah,
kind of brought on is kind of like real information. So you've seen a lot of people turning a bit more to, more credible channels. So government is a credible channel, established media companies that are credible channels. So we're seeing a lot of that happening. The other thing that we're starting to see a bit more of is that the media owners, the tech companies who previously kind of mostly shied away from the regulatory side, business of kind of stream or kind of regulating content coming on. But because of COVID, we're starting to see them take action, pulling down content that is not true or false around COVID. So that is also something that we're seeing. From a content point of view as well, social media has always been a place people kind of default to for information, but also for news, we're seeing that as well. In the area that I'm in, which is the games industry, there's a lot of spike in there as well. because everybody's at home and people still need to kind of interact and engage with each other. And of course, entertainment, as you know, I'm sure there are people that are watching us now who might not have had a Netflix subscription up until the lockdown, and kind of now they do. So there's most definitely, and then there are a lot of live sessions that we're seeing. There's YouTube has got as in Nigeria, I think that's increased by about 50% in the last month to about 26 million users. And so a lot of that also you're seeing more live event interaction. So most definitely content is out there, but people are looking for, on the one hand, true information as it relates to, to kind of what's going on around the world. And second is entertainment, is what we're seeing.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely hit it on the head. And it brings me to my question to Sean. Sean, it's great to have you once again. How would you say, content creators, both independent and media houses, how do they meet that demand while adjusting to their strategies to improve audience retention? A couple of days ago, I was talking with someone about audience retention, and what we agreed on was the fact that audience retention is very, very hard to get at this sort of point. So how do you think content creators can go about it, both independent and media houses, to meet the demand of content right now?
Yes. So where was I? Yes. So basically, one of the major issues or areas of focus that content creators have to look at is basically who is following them, and then what type of what type of information are these people looking for. You have instances and situations where I've worked with different companies where they are focused on create content. We have to have something pushed out at this time, at this hour, and this thing. And all of these are relevant, but they're not more important than the message. The people who are going to be winning right now are the people who understand that you have to tell impactful stories. You have to communicate your values. You have to basically evoke emotional responses within the people that you're getting to follow you. And again, the only way to do this is through effective messaging and storytelling. So that would be the first step of maybe 20,000 steps anybody could take. But again, at this day and time, what you have to look at is that we have to get back to the fundamentals. At some point, if you were, let's say, if you had a strong business, but you were marketing your wares online, or you were reaching out to people online, technically you were taking an extra step forward. Nowadays, nobody can go outside. So now basically your digital footprint, your digital identity that you've been sharing with people is now more important than what you're putting out to people face to face. So again, the things that when it comes to creating digital content and different things like that, again, it's just refocusing in on your message and getting back to the fundamentals of, again, telling the story that's going to reach out to people and get that response.
Well, that's quite interesting. Bukola, do you want to add something to that?
What I said, I think even pre-COVID, I've had this kind of thought around, that capitalism is flawed in its current expression. And I think that when you get down to the meat of it, especially when you're talking about people and brands and, creating content, that you must have the end customer in mind. And that in this particular moment becomes increasingly important, because empathy and, kind of leading that brand with purpose, versus not at the risk of profit, but with purpose nonetheless, become extremely critical at this point. And it's back to the basics, storytelling, and just know your values, who you are, and being empathetic to who you're trying to communicate with.
Well, I hear both of you when you talk about, being empathetic and being who you are, going back to the fundamentals. But, when you look at it, certain content creators that have been creating so many things at some point, they've had very little penetration. They've had, poor audience retention. How would you say that the content creators should adjust to improve these metrics? You don't want to keep creating a whole lot of stuff. When you listen to some people speak, they'll tell you just keep creating. Be persistent, be consistent with creating everything you're creating, and they're not getting the feedback that they really want at this sort of point. So, what do you think that those content creators should do at this point?
I guess I was just sometimes people have to come to a realization that maybe the content you're creating is what you want and not what somebody else wants. Just to give a real and rough message. That's one of the key components of not just creating digital content, but it's the key component of running a business. Just because you think that something is a good idea and you're very interested and passionate about it, doesn't make it a good idea. And again, to go back to the storytelling, just because you have a good idea, if you tell the idea wrong, nobody's going to listen to you. So when you look at your messaging, when you look at how you're putting things across, an important part of it, again, it's like when they say there's an art to storytelling, it's an actual art. And you're actually telling a story. So now when you're looking at breaking these things down, you're doing things like, if you're telling a good story, there has to be a protagonist. There has to be that good guy. There has to be that hero. From a story perspective, we all know what those people look like. But from a business perspective, your hero would be the outline of like who your core audience is. Who is the person that best embodies the problem that your product or service or message solves. And again, you also have to have a bad guy in your story. Who's the bad guy? The bad guy is technically the problem itself. And then when you start telling the story and linking the plot to how you solve this problem, and that plot reaches out to the values of your core consumer, then you start having an effective story. What you have in many times is people do great things, but they do pieces of it. For example, it's like if I have an amazing car, I put a high-powered engine in a car, but I don't have good tires on it, I'm going to kill myself. So like these are things that you have to kind of envision when you're a media person creating content, and you're not getting traction. The response that you're getting is telling you something, and a lot of people don't want to listen. They want to keep trying to push through. Move smart.
That's quite insightful, and we're going to shift gears into the second part, of the talk today, and that's the adopting new models of doing business in a post-COVID Africa, COVID-19 Africa. Now, it brings me to this, most media houses, even pre-COVID times were barely, profitable. You continually hear things about ad revenue, shrinking spaces, and all of those things. When you're talking about content creators, for most media houses, all they think about these times is, they're probably at the mercy of Facebook or Google when it comes to ad revenues and all of these things. So what do you think should be the shift now during after COVID-19? Since they were struggling before COVID-19, maybe this crisis itself, has it created an opportunity for there to be a shift towards profitability?
So the thing is, I think the reference you're making is more in terms of the ones that were struggling before now is probably like newspapers.
Yeah.
I think from when talking about digital publishing, it's a much broader spectrum. So I'll start with the newspaper companies or the media houses in that way first, and across the board, what everybody is seeing, and it's not just and the thing about COVID that we've come to find is that everyone is affected. So the primary thing that everyone needs to kind of get is the digital transformation done as quickly as possible. So whether it's you are a newspaper company or you're a TV company or you are a school or you're a business, what has become clear is it's not digital transformation. It's not an addendum. It's not even nice to have. It's something that should be integral to your business. And I think that is one positive thing that's come out of this. And from a gaming perspective, education perspective, is one of the as difficult as it has been for this migration to happen in this short period of time. But what it tells us is that first, that we're not a lot of us, and that's as governments or as countries or as businesses, we're not ready for this transition. But what this has done is to force us, to adapt in the shortest possible time. And what we're hoping to be able to see a bit more of is that kind of continuation, even after post-COVID, where because a lot of legacy systems have had to shift in this time, that within that remains, right? So, and I think that's can only be a positive. So for newspaper sites, it's that digital migration and being able to earn, because on the one hand, you might, because of news, right, you have a lot more people trying to get information. But on the other side is that ad revenues have dropped. right? First, they're going to refocus, so they're going to cut out, events are not happening, TV, all this, even slightly outdoor will become and stuff like that, and then we refocus to digital, to mobile and stuff like that. But even within that, then you're going to have budget cuts, right? So which means that though you as a media house are growing your reach and your readership, right, or viewership, you might not be able to have that commensurate monetization because the ad spend is dropping. So that's one thing. But what we're seeing in a few other markets, and I don't know if that's going to work well in Africa, is the subscription model. And I know in the UK, as an example, the new subscription model was a problem, but in the last month, they've seen a spike in terms of people actually subscribing to, because they're trying to get valid information to, like places like the Times and a few other places like that. So there's subscription in there. The other thing, for instance, and I'll use, whilst my data, my internet provider in Nigeria is not a media company, but one of the things that we're seeing a lot more people do, or actually I can use Google instead of my internet provider, is that before COVID, in the office, we kind of use Google products. So we used Google Meet for our sessions, and it was a paid for subscription, but it wasn't an enterprise subscription. But once COVID started, they kind of lifted the barriers at the top to say, look, everybody has been moved to enterprise till July 1st. And what that does is, whilst they were earning from us before, we were paying for that feature before, but they've now increased it so that they can retain us. They've given us more latitude, knowing that because of what COVID has brought upon us as a business, we'll need to do a bit more virtually. So they've increased it so that we can do, have more meetings, be able to record our videos and do all that at the same cost. So they changed their product a little bit. Like they kind of just shifted how it's delivered to us because they understand what we're going through. And so my point is that for media companies, it's not only about, necessarily just changing how you earn. It's also, even if you were earning before, it's providing a bit more value just by tweaking the service a little. So that's what I would say.
All right. And my question to you, Sean, just continuing from where Bukola stopped, what do you think is the biggest shift, would be the biggest shift, in models, in digital publishing, like from pre-COVID times to post-COVID times? What would be the biggest shift that we'll see?
I think it's hard to say what will be the biggest shift, but I can say what needs to be the biggest shift.
Okay.
From what I've seen with a few different media companies that I've worked with, is that the act of content creation itself, it draws around a lot of creatives. And when you bring in a lot of creatives, you have people wanting to impact people in a different way than when you have people who are running a business. There needs to be a marriage between the business activities and the content creation activities, meaning that at this point in time, the media houses, basically, they should want to solve a problem. They should want to give information and different things like that. They should want to change the world. But unfortunately, in the environment that we are living in, there are monetary goals. People collect salaries. Sometimes that when we have to basically have the balance of content that is attached to generating revenue. Again, when you're coming up with generating revenue, let's say, for example, if I want to have a bank sponsor content that I'm making, maybe I should start creating content that has something to do with financial literacy. Maybe it should have something to do with, the advances in digital banking and different things like that. People are trying to attract funding and attract eyes in different ways, but they're not creating content that basically is geared towards generating revenue. They're creating content to get attention. Again, there are different types of attention. Every attention that you get is not going to inspire somebody to want to pay. So we have to look at the type of content that we're creating, and again, direct it towards those sources that are going to get funding. Now, again, from a content creator or from a creative mindset, it doesn't sound good and it doesn't feel good. But again, that's where that marriage comes in, where you have to have that balance. That's one of the major things that I would see. That's one of the major advice that I give when I'm consulting or when I'm partnering with different media firms. Again, it's when you go and look behind the scenes, you have a lot of people doing what feels good. And again, at the end of the day, you can't necessarily eat that.
Wow, that's quite Quite insightful, and it brings me to this question, Bukola. You know, I'm one person who is big on, you know, independent creators, independent content creators, because frankly, there are a whole lot more of them than, you know, what you would call legacy media houses or even media houses generally. So for independent creators, what would you be advising them to do right now for them to adopt their models or their business models right now?
To be honest, I think in my experience, I think that the independent creators are kind of a bit further down the curve from a digital transformation point of view of the media houses actually.
True.
So what the advice I'll give them, because if you look at what, well, in the YouTube space as an example, and what creators are doing in that space and how they've been able to use those platforms, and you see that it doesn't really matter where you go and what platform, Instagram and all these things, you know, the social entrepreneurs, there's so many doing, you know, what I guess more legacy companies should have been doing earlier on. However, to Sean's point is that when you're looking for, if what we're trying to talk about is monetization, and in the post-COVID world where you're going to have you know, staff downsizing or right-sizing, depending on how you look at it, but I think it'll be more downsizing at some point. You're going to have less ad spend, so you really have to hit where what the consumer needs that you can provide or you can create content for, which is and that's the little that you might be able to monetize. So you need to be able to kind of look at data and information to see what information is required, and then try to tailor your content to suit that, as long as it's one of the strengths that you have. And I think that more insightful content creation is what might be what's required in the post-COVID world. For example, you know, and I know it, like for when now get into things like Nollywood and their content creators, even in that, like in this time, that what, you know, because we started getting a lot of impact from cinemas and cinema going and all that, and you know, a lot of independent producers and creators started focusing a bit more on that. So that will come back at some point, but I also think that there's a need to shift also in terms of how that content is distributed from a digital perspective, and a few of them are already doing that with certain partnerships. But I think we need to have more buying power and more leverage in those types of negotiations for distribution.
All right, thank you so much. You can send in your questions to all that are watching and listening live to this wonderful session by Bukola, Akingbade, and Sean Burrows. It has been really, really insightful. And I have a question here that maybe it's slightly off, you know, what we've been talking about, but I think it makes a whole lot of sense too. And the question is from Ifan Yawachi, and he says, so how do we balance creating sponsored content and maintaining artistic integrity? Let me take that again. How do we balance creating sponsored content and maintaining artistic integrity? Maybe Sean should take a stab at that.
From my perspective, again, I'm an operations guy. So from my perspective, I would use what's called a break-even analysis. Break-even analysis is you need to understand how much money you need to pay the bills and keep your lights on. And once you are able to bring in that amount of money, then you can start thinking about being creative. But at some point, again, it's a very delicate balance. To say how do you balance that or how it works, again, it's going to be different from person to person, from media house to media house, from content type to content type, community to community. But at the end of the day, you need to, at least from the very first thing you need to know is how much money do you need to generate to ensure that you can be creative? Because there's a different drive when the lights aren't coming on. And I don't like seeing people creating content in some ways out of desperation. You can see it.
Wow. Okay, that was from an operations point of view. Maybe Bukola wants to add something.
Because of course, like in my other life, you know, we do have like marketing companies, so advertising, digital, and that kind of stuff. So I get into spaces with creatives all the time, and they have this kind of, you know, more artistic integrity. I studied architecture. Like I can think in a design. I'm creating in thought, maybe not in expression, right? But the first thing I normally tell creatives is, look, creativity loves constraints. It's as simple. There's a good book out there, get it as a creative person. But I think that's something that is the most important thing, is that, look, creativity actually thrives when there are restrictions on it. And as a creative person, creativity, and well, it's about problem solving. It's not just about expression. Art, unless you're talking art, pure art, art is a form of expression. But when you start talking about sponsored content and things that you create from a marketing perspective, it's a social science, right? So there has to be a need for that information that you're putting out. Now, if you look at the way micro influencers across the world have worked with great brands and a lot of wonderful collaborations, is that the artistic person understands their audience in a really micro level, and understands the objective of the brand, right? And then infuses their expression into delivering that objective. So it's not like here, I don't think we do a great job from that kind of collaboration point of view, where you just get brands saying, oh, post this or do that, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if a brand is more of a deeper level of collaboration, where a brand tells you, these are my objectives, this is what I'm trying to achieve. And the reason why they've come to you is because of what you actually have. So it's about understanding their problems and telling you through your lens to the audience you already serve. So I don't think it's a trade-off necessarily, but it's definitely not just a pure arts process.
Wow, thank you so much. And also, I'm repeating this. If you have questions, you can send them in. Now, my question also goes to Bukola again. At this point, you would say, especially with this break, there's been a whole lot of noise. For content creators now, they are competing with so many people. It's like superfluity of content right now, just so much, and it does affect audience retention. It does affect, especially when it comes to attention span and stuff and things like that. So I think my question would be, how can a content creator at this point, leverage whatsoever gaping holes that we have now? There are things for people to leverage on at this point. Even the fact that people are looking for cheap content, fast content, and all of those things. So how can they leverage all of these things? The problems that we have here.
So I'll speak a bit more broadly about that. I think the gaping holes that we can see that COVID has shown us is a lot, and it's across multiple sectors, right? So education is one, and because of Kucheza, education is something I'm extremely focused on. Gaming is another one, and I'm extremely focused on that as well. But you're seeing that this gap, even in how SMEs interact with customers, even in shopping and things like that. So I really do think the gaps are there. I think the first thing is to kind of say, what first kind of research to know, okay, where are the gaps, and then what can I best apply myself to create, what are my strengths, and where is that perfect marriage that I can create? Even in the gaming space, as a simple example in Nigeria, the lifestyle gaming segment is something that we're starting to see a little bit, it's starting to bubble up a little bit. And of course, that's not just for a local market, that's for a much larger market. But and the monetization of that is also kind of a much longer loop. But there are a few opportunities that we can see in multiple sectors, and I think this is that time actually for content creators to say, I'm not, maybe previously I was just doing this, but now I need to look at where real gaps. There are real gaps, institutional gaps, operational gaps, and kind of even creative gaps from communication. Because if COVID has taught us anything, actually, is in terms of how people communicate. Because when you look at the directive from WHO as an example, and you look at the literacy levels for Nigeria, you can see an opportunity there from a language point of view. From there's a philosophy, Image and Time, a company that we're part of, say about iconography and what that means, even when you get to the African local context, and being able to translate that into communication. So there are opportunity gaps there for content creators to take advantage of.
Wow, thank you so much. And just last question as we round off, we're going to be leaving here very soon. Sean, thank God, this panel is actually quite balanced. And you as the operations guy, what would you say would be, I'm adapting the question to you now, the operational gaps that people can
leverage? It all goes back to the it all goes back to the fundamentals. So there's key areas that you have to kind of tap into. It all starts with the internal struggle that you have to battle. So number one, especially now that you have a lot of people working from home, I think this is going to shift how people hire and how they expect people to work. So you're going to have more people working remotely. So with this being said, number one, you have to be disciplined. You have to definitely be disciplined. You have to kind of, this is all internal work, but the next one is communicating the expectation. And the third one is just being efficient. Now, if we're talking about from a content creator, operationally, or how they're creating, I would say they need to understand what their, I kind of broke it down into situational necessity. Situational necessity, I would say, is that when people are coming to consume your content, what are they coming to you for? Why are they coming to you? So either A, you have to know what that is and leverage that, or B, you have to create what that is. So for example, when people are coming to Ingressive LLC, basically they were coming because they like, hey, these guys, they train technical talent, they create technical content or whatever. So when people were coming to us, there was a general conversation. We are launching an Ingressive for Good foundation. When people were coming to our foundation, they knew exactly why they were coming to, why they will be coming to our foundation. Again, because we want to change the face of Africa. When they're coming to Burrows Enterprises, my personal firm, they know that they're coming basically for operations. So you have to kind of create that story and build a process. So now when you're talking about the operational elements of when you're talking about content creators and creating this situational necessity, once you've created what this core message is, once you've created kind of what people are coming to look to you for, now you can leverage that brand to provide content based on what they're coming to look to you for. So now, again, if I think Ms. Bukola used the example of education. So if you're known for being a platform that is speaking about education, when you keep talking about education, but now when COVID strikes and different things like this come, you're talking about COVID from the educational lens. You are talking about what's going on currently, but you're not losing sight of what your situational necessity is. If somebody's coming to you in the time of COVID, they're wondering like, okay, how do I teach somebody? How do I create learning curriculums and different things like that? Whatever it is that you are focused on, you need to kind of double down on that and be able to do it in an effective manner.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you so much, Sean. Thank you so much, Bukola. Our time is up and we'll have to move out of this place. We'll have to leave the stage. Bukola is the CEO and founder of Kucheza Gaming, and Sean is actually the CEO of Ingressive. It's great to have you guys on it. And it was an absolutely insightful session. You know, there was so much. And when you read through the comments just by the side, you see that these words that you guys have spoken have made huge and long-lasting impact. Thank you so much for hosting, joining this panel, and giving us so much for us to learn from. Thank you.